right, back to Dan. When we work with a client organization, we typically spend a lot of time up front helping leaders understand the specific dynamics of the kind that we've been exploring here at the start of this session. We don't have time to go deep on those matters today. We're going to be covering a lot of ground. We've got 5 major categories that we're covering, but the initial material here, the Wisconsin context and then the organizational context, that's important to understand where you're coming from, where you're operating. My own sense of things is a lot of times in this competitive world, best practices, benchmarking, things of that sort, we're sometimes concerned to a great extent in terms of keeping up with the Joneses. But what we have to realize is that we're the Smiths. And if we're going to keep up with the Joneses, the first thing we have to do is be the best Smiths that we can be. So one of the things that, if we take that comment that I just made one step further, it's important for leaders to be self-aware. Self-awareness might be the most critical aspect of leadership. Self-aware leaders are authentic. They're genuine. So you as an individual leader, where are you on your journey? Where are you in terms of becoming the best leader that you're capable of being? And then collectively, in terms of the overall implications of our seminar this morning, what commitment is there to systemically develop the leadership talent at your organization? So organizations that are really serious about becoming highly effective organizations are really serious about leadership. They have built and deployed leadership models. Some of you in the field that are practitioners doing this kind of work, you're familiar with the term competency models. Leadership success factors. What is it that we want leaders at this organization to be able to do? What should they know? What is expected of us at the front line of leadership? What's expected of us at the middle level of leadership? What's expected of us at the strategic level of leadership? You'd like to think that the people upstairs are operating strategically, not so tactically. You'd like to think that the people who aspire to go upstairs are making connections strategically over time. How does the big picture come to be? So on this slide, and this is slide 24 in the slide deck, in the absence of a leadership competency model with a client organization, this is a model that ODC has developed over time. And it's a little bit of an eye twister. We're not going to go into it in great detail, but there are 2 boxes drawn in the sense of a faint light blue box, the big picture, and then a dotted line box of the internal small picture. So it's the internal business environment and the external business environment. And at the top of the figure, there are a couple of arrows with words saying dynamic tension. It's drawn that way because effective leaders need to understand that what they're doing inside the organization is proven out in the external environment in which the organization operates. It's an inside-out kind of approach. You've got to get your act together internally if you're going to do well externally. So by being attentive to the external environment, and we're trying to be simplistic and we're trying to make this understandable and actionable, the external environment, when leaders are attentive to those issues, 3 C's in some ways encompass what's going on externally. What's going on in the way of change? What's trending? Are there people, if you're a private sector organization, you better be mindful of the competition. That's a lot of what best practices and benchmarking have to do with. And then who are your constituents? And importantly, what is the competition doing vis-a-vis your constituents? They'd like to steal your customers because they'd have your customers and you wouldn't. So behind the 3 C's is a whole host of analytic and investigative activity, but that's the big old world out there. Leaders, in order to make organizational adaptations to drive change, they have to be responsive to those 3 C's in order to internally integrate, link, and align the efforts of the organization. And fundamentally, from our perspective, 3 leadership domains characterize what effective leaders do relative to the 3 Ps of the internal business environment of purpose, partnership, and process. And we'll talk more about that before the morning's out. Leaders are technically or subject matter proficient, they are interpersonally proficient, and they are strategically proficient. The technical level of leadership is most relevant to the front line of leadership, close to where the work gets done. If you're working in an accounting firm and you're the frontline accounting leader, you're the team lead, one would hope that you know a thing or two about accounting. As you move up, and I'm talking now perhaps in a larger organizational setting, as you move up and become a mid-level leader, as we know in the room, a lot of what goes on in mid-level leadership is interdisciplinary work, cross-functional work, working with your peer or colleague in the other department. So it becomes much more important to be an interpersonally proficient leader. And finally then, when you get to the C-suite, chief executive, vice president, the apex of the organization, that's where you better have some high-level strategic kinds of skills. And we happen to think that top leaders didn't fall to the top of the hierarchy, they grew to the hierarchy. So we'd like to think that over time, if an organization were highly committed along these lines, their leaders would all possess a multitude of tools of this kind. They're not one-trick ponies. They're highly proficient, highly skilled, and they know when and how to use those kinds of skills. So the point of this is, what is necessary to lead effectively in your organization? The model that we're about to have you delve into a little bit is a generic model, but it might have some relevance to your organization. So at your place settings, at the table, is a leadership inventory. It's just 40 items. It's a white handout